So after 4 years straight of people asking my opinion of the show Game of Thrones, I decided to give it a second chance this last week.
What took us so long?
So let's talk about it. So ever since I started this channel, Game of Thrones is probably the show that I've been asked about the most, for the obvious reason that it was a wildly popular show this past decade, especially right as my channel was kind of gaining momentum. That show was building to its climax. I'm kind of dwell in the nerd realm. Channels that cover the stuff that I cover usually are into the show Game of Thrones. So every time I did a live stream, people would ask me, what do I think about Game of Thrones? Can I rank the seasons of Game of Thrones? And it was to the point that basically every time I do a live stream, live Q&A, I had a disclaimer at the top of the description saying, I have not seen Game of Thrones, therefore I cannot review the show. I cannot rank the seasons. And then this naturally always followed up with, why haven't you watched it? Oh, I think you'd love it. It's amazing. You have to check it out. The full story is that, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I don't remember how many years back it was, but my wife and I did watch season 1. And we binged it properly, really watched season 1. And it's just very intense for the two of us to watch. Certainly there's a lot of, when you're in episode 2 and we're killing a dog, a lot of babies dying in the mix, and pregnant women losing babies, the nihilism of it, the dark side to it, not my wife's kind of thing at all. We then start the second season, and at with the end of the first episode of season 2, I think they do a mass murdering of babies or something like that. And my wife was like, I'm out. So she just checked out instantly at that point in time. So I slowly watched season 2 over the course of 2 or 3 years, which is not a very good way to watch Game of Thrones. So I got less and less out of it every time I watched a new episode, and it was legitimately over the span of years, in which case, I didn't remember plot lines, threads, characters. So season 2 meant nothing to me. I don't remember anything about it. But technically, my eyes have seen the screen of season 2. And I just had never really gotten into the show like other people did. And some of that is that, watching it with a wife that's really not interested, and there's constantly things happening that are making you go, really? Oh, kind of pulls you out of the experience, as opposed to if you're watching with someone that's also very invested in it. The other side to it, I like classic heroes. I like good and bad stories. I like it when good triumphs over evil. And the nature of this show is to take what normally happens, that we normally are building towards a sense of justice, or normally working towards, even if the good guy loses, so does the bad guy. And that's just not what this show is. That's not how this plays out. And so when you combine that with, a wife that wasn't really into it, just never really got super invested in it. And then as my channel kind of came about, it would have been very profitable for me to watch the show. Because it was wildly successful, and I know my audience would have, if I'd put out a season 8 review, and then season ranking, character ranking, top 10 episodes, if I did all that stuff, it would have done great numbers on my channel. But with the nature of my channel kind of being a little bit more family friendly, I just didn't want to, I didn't feel in good conscience I could watch a show like that just for the numbers or something. I'd have to watch it because I felt like I just wanted to watch it. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but just given you're in the first episode and you have incest, molestation, lots of prostitution, of course, attempted murder of a child, episode 2, dog killed. I don't know, it just dwells on a lot of stuff that just feels awfully harsh for my channel. And it's just not what I default towards, so it didn't strike me as to me, I didn't want to watch it just for the views. It was like, if I'm in the mood to watch it, I'll talk about it, but it has to be on my terms and my time. All that is the backstory to this past week. And so, basically, my wife was diagnosed with COVID last week, and she's mild symptoms, nothing to worry about up to this point in time. She's just tired. But that's meant she's been quarantined in a room separate, so I've had time to kind of watch whatever I want to watch. And there were just a set of whatever, of emotions, experiences, moments. I was like, I know she didn't like the show. Let me give it another shot and watch through it. And that's what I did over the last few days and binged through season 1 and wanted to share my quick thoughts on it. Now that we're 7 minutes into this video already and I haven't even started talking about the season. So what did I think about this show second time around? And I certainly enjoyed it quite a bit more, or at least I got invested in it a lot more. And some of the harsher elements of the show that were off-putting when I first watched it without having proper expectations, when you know what you're getting in for, when you know the rules of the game, you're able to accept things a lot easier. Obviously, dogs, babies, wives, husbands dying, children dying, always pretty harsh. But when you know that's what you're signing up for, you're ready for it. And so I went into it this time knowing much better what it was. And in fact, since I've seen season 1 before, I kind of knew where everything was going. And also, I think watching it without kind of someone that was frustrated by it and without many distractions as I was watching it, because it was like late at night, it was a lot easier to kind of get invested in the big, broad story and the complex nature of every relationship. This intertwined set of kingdoms and dynasties competing in a Game of Thrones that I just found myself getting more out of it. At least caring a lot more about what was going to happen to people and the choices that they were going to make and why they were making those choices. And, whenever I watched it before, just kind of put it on in the background. I don't remember how much I was distracted, but certainly I don't know that I pieced together so much of the backstory as I did this time, because there's just a lot of things that they slowly reveal to you and you start to go, oh, okay, I get, oh, that's why you hate that. Okay. And could track with it a lot better this time, to care a lot more. And you start to realize how every action just topples down the set of dominoes of destruction. Of everything is a delicate balance, that any power play will turn into everyone else making a power play that just turns into all-out war. That is this series as a whole. As you go into the specific characters of it, of course, almost all the Lannisters are just the worst thus far, except Tyrion. He's, of course, the likable one that is charming, funny, and at least thus far, not a total sociopath. The rest of them are psychopaths they're despicable and devoid of any actual redeeming qualities. So perhaps as I go through the show, they'll give me some reason as to why I shouldn't be disgusted by all these people. But at this moment, they are just really gross people. And it's kind of fascinating in just how manipulative they are. But there's a certain point in time where characters just become kind of one-dimensional for being just so narcissistic and devoid of empathy, sympathy, or anything for other people. And most all of our Lannisters fall into that category. I know you're supposed to hate them, but at least thus far, I just don't have a good reason why they're just so grotesque. It's certainly in some of these contexts where it's just pure cruelty. Joffrey's designed to be, what if these two monsters raised a kid? It would be the most entitled monster you've ever seen. And he's certainly that. So that one makes sense, but some of the other stuff with Jaime and them, they just seem like cruel people in a way that hopefully in future seasons, if I continue watching, will be elaborated on a little bit in some way that'll make me go, gotcha, okay, I see why you're the worst. But right now, they're just the worst. The Stark family, of course, are supposed to be designed to be the more noble of characters, more noble of the families that are trying to do the right and don't want to pick fights with people. But with the nature going on with the nature of this show, everyone is kind of designed to be multidimensional. There's always kind of layers to them. In which case, built right into the show is that, Ned Stark has a bastard son, and it's kind of openly addressed, obviously, right in front of everyone the whole time. But it's not even a way that he's like apologetic to his wife about it, and even our understandings of marriages and things like that. What it means to them, it's interesting because it's so detached from as the way we perceive of marriages and relationships, and it's so steeped a full-blown patriarchy here, and like the Stark marriage is like the healthy one, and it has all sorts of things that by any reasonable estimation are not the healthiest, but they clearly actually care about each other and don't want to leave one another and care what happens to each other and are scheming against each other. They're working to save each other. And so even with all the dark things that are kind of associated with them and owning slaves and taking people captive, they have a bit of humanity in them that you can resonate with. The two people that probably the most easy to connect with, at least in season one, probably Daenerys and Jon Snow, as their kind of victims that kind of find their confidence. They have more traditional arcs for characters that, Daenerys is, in the first time we're introduced to her, molested by her brother, who's just sees her as an item to be used for his purposes, and takes care of her in the sense that it's his sister, but he also doesn't care what happens to her. And then, the opening scenes of her and her marriage are just brutal because it's rape. But you see her discover, like, I'm not owned by my brother. I don't have to do what he says. I'm actually a powerful person in my marriage. Wait. And you see her discover, like, I can make choices. I can choose to, and there's something compelling there. You can see dangers in it too. I know enough about where the show goes. I've heard enough things to know that the troubles are brewing, that she's not the sweet little girl that I know enough, though I don't know everything. But there's enough there that it's kind of pretty profound as you have this scene where she's in a marriage where at the beginning she's crying over it and very quickly discovers this is where she's found her confidence, and that this guy that in certain senses mistreated, the husband that's kind of mistreated her, he's acting within a moral code and he actually cares about her, whereas her brother has just wanted to use her. And so there's like a deep love and affection there that's compelling while being in so many ways horribly off-putting to our perceptions of marriage and what is and isn't appropriate. And you have these moments where, like, she eats a heart in front of a group of people that is, total barbarism to us. Like, she's literally covered in blood, but it's this very profound scene as you watch it. And then as you see her brother spiral out of control, as he realizes he doesn't have any control, and he's someone that does not know how to, he's so entitled and so unable to adjust, to pivot, to read the situation, and unable to realize that he is not in a world that plays by the rules that he plays by, that, he obviously gets himself very quickly killed in a way that everyone in the audience is going like, oh, this guy's about to die. This guy is not making wise choices. And then he dies a horrible death. And in the one sense, you can't feel bad for this guy at all after the stuff that he said to his sister in the first 2 episodes and how he repeatedly treated her and how foolish he acted. And at the same time, there's just a little bit of you're like, that guy was so clueless. He didn't know he was like he what was he thinking like, that 99% like, yeah, that guy had that coming, and 1% of like, oh, that poor entitled person was such a fool. But all that to say that Daenerys has more traditional kind of, there's success in what she does. She grows as a person, and while there's, of course, as you get into the season, some really dark stuff that happens, some positive that happens as well. The other one being Jon Snow of, the bastard son that is trying to find his place in the world, has this romanticized view of this going and protecting the wall, and before he even gets there realizes like, oh crap, this is not going into one of these fantasy stories I've heard. This is a nasty, gross place. And it takes a toll on him. But as a person of good character, of true values, he keeps making the best of it. He keeps having obstacles put in front of him, and he keeps doing the right thing. When you have a show that has so many people that are despicable and perpetually never do the right thing and perpetually do just what's selfish, when you have a person that is put in a bad situation, has every reason to be bitter, angry, and be one of these nasty people, but chooses not to in that moment, naturally that's a more relatable character than so many of these others that have so much and still want to take more. And maybe that's even, at least thus far into season 1, when you contrast like the Lannisters that are the richest family in this world, and they have so much power, and they still want to take more. You look at it, and there's nothing about that's not gross. It's everything that's some of the worst of mankind and humanity, which same thing. So I didn't need to repeat that. But it's the worst of it when you have someone that has it all, and all they can think is, how do I get more? How do I keep obtaining? And they openly state that they redefine reality to serve their own needs. Even they've taught their son to do this and then trained him to be the king. And therefore he's a true sociopath. And now he's the king, and it leads to dire consequences. As said many times, even in this video, by default, I'm someone that likes happy endings. I like traditional good triumphing over evil. And therefore, this show does a lot of things that by default are not the path I would take a story. Especially as you go into the final 2 episodes and you're seeing the scenarios to where, like, maybe they could save Ned. Okay, maybe Ned's going to do it. And Ned's little arc, like this man that has an honor code, he will not say that this is the rightful king, because that is not the dying wishes of the king, and he's not the rightful king. Like, this guy's not supposed to be on the throne. Like, there's all these terrible reasons this kid should not be on the throne. But to protect his daughter, he declares that he's a traitor, only for the horrible king to say off with his head, while his mother, who's a terrible sociopath, even she thinks that this is madness. And if she thinks this is madness, we are going very far down a path of madness then. It's just tough. It's tough to like know how to respond to it, because it's at some point in time you want some sort of justice in a story. That, like, we're wired to want that. You want something that feels like evil just isn't triumphing. And if all I'm doing is seeing evil triumph, that's frustrating. And there's a worldview to that I don't know that is the best. So it'll be interesting. Likewise with the Daenerys plotline, where you introduce this fun barbarian character called Drogo, with Jason Momoa playing it, a great part for him. And you establish him as this ultimate alpha barbarian. And even the scene the action that leads to his death is him doing an alpha move of basically letting a guy hit him with a sword, which is kind of a lot of fun to see him do that, and just goes for it. and that's like the thing that leads to his demise through some of these other. That's one of the ones also from when I first watched it. I was like, why did we waste this character in that manner in this moment? And at the same time, kind of, when you start to realize, okay, it was never about him. He was a crucial part of the journey of the Khaleesi as she's discovering who she is and consequences of her choices. And I mean, even what happened to Khal Drogo was due to his own actions. His barbarism had consequences that you kind of burn a lot of bridges when you kill, murder, rape, and burn people's villages down. And it's just an interesting one because the show is told from the perspective, or those stories are told from the perspective of Daenerys. And so we see it as her husband was killed by someone that betrayed her kindness, when the other perspective, and likewise kind of loses the baby and everything like that, when the other side to it is, if you told the story from any perspective, you would not feel bad at all that this woman killed him. Like, you wouldn't in any way be like sympathetic towards it. Like, oh, they did horrible things to her people, her city, her village, everything. They were horrible people that needed to be stopped, and she was part of stopping them. But the story's not being told from her perspective, which once again is kind of one of the themes of this show, of you see things from perspectives. But I don't know. We'll see how it plays out as where season 2 takes it. Like, I literally don't remember anything about season 2, even though I've watched it more recently than I watched season 1. But I watched season 1 properly, like a normal binge of it when I watched it years back. And season 2, it was totally abnormal and spread out over time. So one season into the show, I am pretty invested at the moment, of wanting to know what's going to happen. And I imagine in a certain sense feeling kind of that, whatever it was that drew people to this show for a full decade, I feel at least to some extent more so than in the past. I'm curious of how all of this will play out, discovering it, hoping at least some justice will happen at some point in time. Once again, I know it. I'm connected enough to the popular culture to have seen pictures of various characters in bad situations, knowing about red weddings and all sorts of things like that, it won't be totally shocking when some of these things happen, but I don't know how they get there, and I don't know the specifics of what all of them mean, but certainly wouldn't say I'm loving it the way many of you seem to during its prime, and wouldn't declare it the best show of the decade or anything like that. But I am invested enough to continue watching, and I don't know, if I make it to the end, looks like we might get some rankings out of it. I'd say let me know what you think about it down below in the comment section, but if you're tuning into this video, I probably already know what you think about it because you've been asking me to talk about it forever, but you've been trying to convince me it's the best show of the decade, so I already kind of know what you guys think about it, but just wanted to let you know I have started watching it, and maybe I'll finish it, I don't know. Anyway, thank you for watching this long, rambling discussion of Season 1 of Game of Thrones. Keep talking movies and TV too much.